Monster City Madhouse, a year-round online store full of Halloween and classic horror shirts, with an emphasis on the vintage look. Use code SAVE10 for 10% off your order. MonsterCityMadhouse.com. Free shipping and financing's available. Welcome back to Southern Ghost Stories. I am Alan Searcy, the American Historian. I'm glad you guys are here today. Got a fun show planned, talking about some weird, wild stuff in Salt Lake City, Utah. Hey, you guys, don't forget the big contest going on right now. If you listen to the show, you go to Apple Podcasts, Spotify. If you go in there and leave a review and send a screenshot to the Southern Ghost Stories Facebook page or Southern Ghost Stories Instagram page, we'll put you in a drawing of giving away 5 books end of this month or early February. And I've already got some good reviews in. I appreciate you guys. But yeah, interact with the show, send me some stuff. And also, while you're on the Southern Ghost Stories Facebook page, send me some questions. I got one the other day from Brenda, and she was asking, what is my earliest experience with the paranormal? So that's a good question. I've talked about things that I've seen and that have happened to me over the years. I mean, I think I've told you guys I lived in a haunted house in South Nashville, right behind Traveler's Rest, a historic site in Middle Tennessee. I saw all kinds of weird things. Trash can moved in the middle of the night. I've had things happen to me in Savannah, New Orleans, St. Louis. But my earliest ghost story, earliest paranormal experience, it didn't really happen to me, but I was around it. So I'll kind of talk about that. Well, when I was a kid, my uncle bought a house in, I think it was technically Hermitage, right outside Nashville. It could have been Mount Juliet. It's right there on the line. But anyway, when they moved into this house, they had a pinball machine downstairs. And it was like the Black Knight or something is what it was called. It was like this medieval knight was the theme of the pinball machine. Well, my cousin always told me that he'd be asleep at night and he would hear the pinball machine talking and playing and making noise. And like he knew it was turned off. So come to find out, his house was haunted. Well, the pinball machine started making noise and they moved in. My aunt would see, she'd be sitting in her bedroom in front of a mirror doing her makeup in the morning, and she would see like a lady, Native American, kind of float behind her in the mirror. So it kind of unnerved her, kind of freaked her out. It happened more than once from what I understand. So I was always over there hanging out with my cousin, but I'd heard things. I really didn't know what was going on. Well, it was so frequent that my uncle, he went and got a priest or a preacher to come and bless the house. And eventually all the strange happenings kind of just went away. Well, flash forward like 5 years later, my uncle, he was having a Christmas party or Halloween party, some kind of party, get together. And there was a guy who was invited, and him and my uncle were sitting by the bonfire and talking like, oh, well, you know, this house, you know kind of where it sits. You know what happened here, right? And my uncle was just, he didn't know. He said, well, tell me what's going on. He said, well, your house is right along the Trail of Tears. And, of course, this gentleman didn't know about the Native American woman my aunt had seen. So when he told my uncle that, it just clicked. You know, I guess during the Trail of Tears, when the Cherokee were displaced and going west, perhaps there was an older Native American lady who died there on the grounds. I don't really know. But it kind of clicked, 2 and 2 made 4, and it kind of made sense why she had seen what she had seen. So, yeah, I never saw the old lady, but my cousin always talked about it, and I'd heard things from my aunt and uncle. But, yeah, I didn't see the ghost, but that was probably my earliest. I was probably, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. I was young. So I didn't actually see a ghost until I think it was 2021 at Rosemont and Gallatin. But I think I've talked about that pretty extensively on previous shows. But, yeah, I appreciate them sending me the question. I love interacting with you guys. And, yeah, get on the Southern Ghost Stories Facebook page and Instagram page. Send me the screenshot for the reviews and send me some questions. I did a Q&A, I guess it was back in November, December, where I did straight listener questions, talking about wild stuff I've learned through my books and experiences I've had. So I was doing some research on Salt Lake City. I guess it was back in December or November. And I found some really wild things. I made some notes, and I wanted to kind of dig in. The past 2 shows I've done have been North Carolina, because I found some wild stuff there with some Appalachian folklore and some witches out in the woods, just creepy, crazy stuff. But yeah, refer back to those shows. But today, John W. Dawson, he arrived in Salt Lake City on December 7th, 1861. He was an outsider appointed by Abraham Lincoln. Within days, he had managed to alienate the local population there in Salt Lake City by demanding heavy taxes and opposing the territory's bid for statehood. But it wasn't just his politics that sealed his fate. It was his interaction with Albina Merrill Williams. Albina, she was a young Mormon widow who served as Dawson's housekeeper. According to the accounts of the time, Dawson's indecent proposals weren't just subtle advances. They were very aggressive. So aggressive that Albina allegedly fought him off with a heavy fireplace shovel. She had to chase the governor of Utah of the territory out of her home in a fury. So desperate to bury the scandal, you got to think, back then Utah was a very conservative society, and there were a lot of Mormons, and this guy come in and chase a Mormon widow around her house, trying to, have a little fun with her. That was a big scandal. And so to get around all that, Dawson, he offered her $3,000 in hush money. And he even threatened to shoot the editor of a local newspaper, Thomas B.H. Stenhouse, if the story ever saw the light of day. Well, as you would expect, the secret got out. Albina met with Brigham Young to relay the details of the assault, and the word spread throughout the tight-knit community like wildfire. By New Year's Eve, Dawson realized the city had become a cage. He boarded a mail coach under the cover of night, and he hired a guard to protect him. He didn't realize that the protection sent to accompany him included men like Woods Reynolds, who was actually a relative of Albina, and the young outlaw Maroney Clawson. They weren't there to ensure his safety. Woods and Maroney, they were there to ensure he paid for what he did to Albina before he reached the territorial line. So the group drug Dawson from the coach, and they beat him senseless. It was a brutal, messy affair that left the governor humiliated, and the vigilantes in the crosshairs of the law. So weeks later, the law catches up. Maroney Clawson was shot and killed by Salt Lake police while trying to escape. Now, Maroney was a criminal, but he was a human being. A police officer named Henry Heath, a man known to be generous, integrity, he felt sympathy for Maroney. He paid $5 out of his own pocket, and that would have been like a week's wages back then. And he spent it to buy Clawson a black burial suit. And he wanted that young man to be buried with some dignity. So Maroney Clawson, he was buried in the north bench of the Salt Lake City Cemetery. But his story doesn't end there. His family eventually comes to claim the body to move it to the family plot in Draper. So one morning, Officer Henry Heath, he stands by as they hoist the coffin up to pry off the lid. Well, that new suit he bought, it was gone. Maroney Clawson was lying face down, stark naked, and his body was callously tossed back into the box. Henry Heath, the officer, he was horrified. He knew he saw that boy buried in the suit. He realized right then and there that something was amiss. He went straight to the city gravedigger, an immigrant named Jean Baptiste. Heath and a posse marched to Baptiste's house in the avenues. When they kicked in the door, the smell hit them. The cloying scent of earth and decay. But it's what they saw that defied logic. Boxes were stacked to the rafters. Inside, hundreds of burial shrouds, dresses, suits, and most heartbreaking of all, over 60 pairs of tiny leather shoes taken from the feet of buried children. Baptiste hadn't sold them. He was hoarding them. He was even wearing the clothes of the dead under his own coat. So, as you would expect, the city, it went into a frenzy. The courthouse was turned into a viewing room where the families walked through piles of tattered, dirt-stained clothing, trying to identify the last things their mother or child ever wore. The fury was so high that a lynch mob began to form. The people, they didn't want Baptiste dead. They just wanted him erased. So the authorities know they couldn't keep him in the city jail. The mob was going to tear the building down. So they turned to a punishment that feels more 1262 than 1862. In the dead of night, they take Jean Baptiste to a blacksmith. And history tells us he was pinned down while a hot iron was pressed against the skin of his forehead. The smell of searing flesh filled the room as the words grave robber were burned into his skull. Some accounts say they went further and they clipped the bottoms of his ears. Clipping was a form of punishment. I've found that in my studies, researching places in Middle Tennessee. It's a way that people would know that you were a criminal the rest of your life. So after he got grave robber burned into his skull and they clipped his ears, they rode Baptiste out into the Great Salt Lake to Fremont Island. It's a desolate, salt-crusted rock. No fresh water, no shade, only the brine and the biting fleas. They left him there with a small shack and a single cow for food. He's a living ghost on a dead island. Well, 3 weeks later, a scouting party returned to check on the prisoner. They found the cow slaughtered and skinned. They found the shack, but the roof timbers had been torn off. Jean Baptiste was gone. So the theory is that he used the raw cowhide and the wooden booms to stitch together a makeshift raft. He likely tried to pedal across the heavy, buoyant salt water toward the mainland. And he was never seen again. Nobody is ever found that could be definitively linked to him. Some say he died there in the brine. Others believe he made it to the shore and lived out his days in the desert. A man with a branded face, forever haunted by the people whose clothes he stole. So, whatever happened to John W. Dawson, the man whose flight from a fireplace shovel inadvertently led to the capture of the shroud thief? After the beating at Mountain Dell, Governor Dawson eventually made it back to his home in Indiana. But he didn't return as a hero or a victim. He arrived as a man in total political ruin. He described that while he was nursing his wounds in the desert, the U.S. Senate had caught wind of the Albina Williams scandal and officially rejected his appointment. He wasn't even the governor of Utah anymore. On paper, it was as if he had just never existed. Dawson spent the rest of his life as a political chameleon. He drifted between political parties and failing in multiple bids for office. He was widely despised in his home state, and one local newspaper called him a hated ruffian without a solitary friend on earth. It's pretty harsh. But in a strange twist of history, he eventually found a bizarre kind of redemption, but not in politics, but in storytelling. He became the first person to write a biography about his childhood friend, Johnny Appleseed. John W. Dawson died in 1877 at the age of 56. He was buried in Fort Wayne, Indiana, interred with full dignity, wearing a suit of clothes that, unlike the victims of Jean Baptiste, he was actually allowed to keep. So, yeah, that's a wild story. And just imagine being branded with a hot branding iron on your forehead. I mean, that's gnarly and gruesome, but that's how it was back then. I've read stories where people, like, if you were a horse thief, they would brand HT onto your hand right there in between the skin between your thumb and your forefinger. So branding, that was kind of a thing they did back in the 1800s. So it's kind of barbaric today, but it was a thing. I've never seen anybody with a grave robin brand on their forehead. I've seen some folks with tattoos that look pretty bad, but anyway, it's another story. Well, if you walk into the Salt Lake City Cemetery, it's a vast, beautiful park of the dead. And if you head to Plot X, Block 1, you'll find a headstone that stops people dead in their tracks. It isn't grand. It isn't ancient. It's a simple slab of evening glow granite. But it's the words carved into the stone that has fueled nightmares for 60 years. Under the name Lilly Gray, it reads, "Victim of the Beast 666. What in the world? So, for the local teenagers who dare each other to go visit at midnight, it's proof of a curse. For the occult enthusiast, it's sign of a hidden cult. But the real story behind those 6 characters isn't about the devil. It's about a man named Elmer, a kidnapping in Oregon, and a lifelong war against the world. So Lilly Gray, she died in November 1958 at the age of 77. By all accounts, she was just a regular, quiet, ordinary woman. But her headstone suggests a life of biblical torment. The number 666, the number of the beast from the book of Revelation, usually implies something demonic. Well, urban legends in Utah claim that Lilly was a victim of a satanic ritual, or that she was cursed by Aleister Crowley himself. Some even say if you walk around the grave 3 times, you'll hear Lilly screaming. People leave pennies, candles, and stones, treating it like some kind of shrine to the macabre. But death certificates don't lie. Lilly Gray died of natural causes, specifically pulmonary embolism and kidney failure at Salt Lake General Hospital. So, if the beast didn't kill her, who put those words on her grave? To understand the grave, you have to understand the man who paid for it. Her husband, Elmer Gray. Elmer and Lilly married late in life. To her neighbors, they were just an elderly couple. But Elmer had a history that he tried to bury. Decades before he arrived in Utah, Elmer, he was a man on the run. In the early 1900s, he was arrested in Oregon for kidnapping. He spent time in the Oregon State Penitentiary, and his records describe a man who was deeply, quote-unquote, uncooperative. Elmer didn't see himself as a criminal, though. He saw himself as a victim. He believed the police, the courts, and government were all part of a singular demonic entity designed to crush the common man. In his writings and legal filings, he began to use a specific term for the bureaucracy that imprisoned him: the beast. When Lilly died in 1958, Elmer was alone and bitter. He blamed the medical system and the state for her death. In his mind, she hadn't just died of old age. She'd been devoured by the same system that had spent decades trying to destroy him. He went to the monument carver with a very specific request. He wanted the world to know what had really happened to his wife. He used the 666, not as a reference to a literal demon, but as a symbolic middle finger to the beast of the law. Researchers later found Elmer's own application for a headstone. In it, he listed his wife's cause of death not as embolism, but as quote-unquote kidnapped by the beast. He was using the cemetery as a permanent stone carved protest. Now, the ultimate irony: Elmer was buried just a few feet away from Lilly. His own headstones, it's just remarkably plain. No mentions of the beast, no numbers, no protest. It's as if he spent every ounce of his creative spite on her marker, leaving nothing for himself. Doesn't make much sense. You think he would put something kind of squirrely on his stone, but who knows. So today, the grave is one of the most visited sites in Utah. People come looking for ghosts, but what they find is a monument to one man's obsession. Elmer Gray managed to turn his wife's final resting place into a riddle that would outlive them both, proving that human bitterness can be just as haunting as any supernatural curse. Lilly Gray, she wasn't a victim of a demon. She was a victim of a very, very long, lonely personal grudge against the government. So yeah, that's wild. I'd seen the stone before, like in chat groups and Facebook groups, but yeah, Google that if you want to. It's really wild. Lilly, go to Google, type in Lilly Gray B666. It'll pop up, and it's just a regular stone marker made of granite, and you'll see you'll see for yourself on Google. It's remarkable. It's simple, but it's pretty spectacular, over the top, and kind of cool, I guess, if you like weird, wild stuff like I do. So, hey, like I said earlier, make sure you're following Southern Ghost Stories on Facebook, Southern Ghost Stories on Instagram. Send me some questions. Take a screenshot of your review. Please leave some reviews, and I'll send those over to me, and I'll draw some winners out of a hat and give out some free books. And speaking of books, I have some new books coming later this year. I announced one on Facebook, I think on January the 1st, New Year's Day. The next book's going to be Pistols at Red River. And it's a story of Andrew Jackson, the dueling story. If you heard, Andrew Jackson was married to a married woman. It's a crazy story, but a young man kept prodding Jackson, insulting his wife, and they decided to have a duel on the Tennessee-Kentucky line at the Red River. And I mean, it's pretty iconic, actually. But I'm looking forward to that. It'll be out in early May. This year is actually the 120th anniversary of the Jackson-Dickinson duel. So that's going to be kind of fun. But lots of stuff coming down the pipe. And make sure you follow Southern Ghost Stories on Facebook, Instagram. You can follow me, Alan Searcy. I'm on Twitter, Facebook. I just joined what's it called? I'm so old now I touch anymore. What's it called? TikTok. So yeah, come find the old man on TikTok and we'll tell some ghost stories. So anyway, keep checking back. I'm Alan Searcy, and I'll see you guys next time. Check out the exclusive shirts from Monster City Madhouse, Gravestone, Rocktober, and Vile Halloween. All that and much more at MonsterCityMadhouse.com.